Hello YouTube, I'm Zach, you're watching ZakDTV. Thanks for stopping into the place for interesting news from around the net. Today's episode, I have an update on that Mowgli Girl story I did last week. We're also looking at the Space Probe Plus. We're going to check out the EPA versus the EPA. I've got two great stories about archaeology. And I'm going to wrap up with a story on a woman who just should not be allowed to drive ever again. Remember, if you like what I do, go ahead and click that subscribe button over here by the Stormtrooper. Well, let's get right into this. I covered a story last week about what they're calling the Mowgli Girl or the woman raised by monkeys, stuff like that. There have been some more developments in this story, and I just thought I'd share them with you. It has come out that two guys have gone and tried to say that they are her uncles, and that she's been missing for about 13 months. Although officials say she couldn't have been in the woods more than 3 days. The doctors are saying that they think she might be slow, and that's why she was walking on all fours, grunting and screeching like an animal, and that she seems to be acclimating to human contact a lot quicker than they'd expect for somebody who's been in the woods that long. They all say there's a lot of game cameras in that area, and if the park rangers are doing their job, they would have came across her earlier too. There's a lot of different stories here. Everybody's reporting something different. So I'm going to keep my eye on this and keep moving forward with it. We will get to the bottom of this one, and I'll bring you more information as I have it. For my next story, I want to talk about this awesome trip that NASA has planned for 475 days from now. They are going to launch what they're calling the Solar Probe Plus. This is the first satellite of its kind, and it's going to go out and circle the sun. It is scheduled for launch late July to mid-August of 2018. It'll do its first flyby of Venus in September of 2018, and it's going to use Venus as a gravity assist 7 times to sling itself around the sun. It's going to get closer and closer on each pass. Its closest pass will end up being in 2024. December 19th of 2024 will be the closest it comes to the sun. Within 3.7 million miles of the sun. That's inside the orbit of Mercury, and that's close enough it's actually in the corona of the sun. By this time, it's going to be traveling at 450,000 miles per hour or 125 miles per second. For a little perspective, a fast bullet here on Earth leaves the barrel going about 818 miles an hour or 1,200 feet per second. So this thing's going to be cruising when it gets close to that sun. This mission was originally suggested 50 years ago, but we did not have the technology to build a craft that could stand up to the heat and the cold, and the heat and the cold. You got to figure this thing's going to transition from heat to cold on each one of those 7 passes around Venus. That's going to wreak havoc on this thing. I really want to see how it's going to hold up. They figure with this probe, they're going to be able to study things like coronal mass ejections, the solar winds, and even those high energy particles that leave the sun. They're hoping to get a better understanding why it's hotter in the corona than it is on the actual surface of the sun as well. There's a lot of good information that can come out of this. But it is the first time we're ever going to get this close to the sun. And you know it's going to raise more questions than it answers. I'd just like to see what questions it can answer. So I'm definitely going to be keeping an eye on this over the next couple years. And I'll bring you updates whenever I get them. My next story just sounds like sheer shenanigans, but I have to bring it up to you. I have to talk about this. This is about the EPA being sued based on the EPA's own scientific findings. So here's how it goes. Back in 2006, the EPA was approached concerning the use of chlorpyrifos. I don't think I'm pronouncing it right, but I tried, so you got to give me credit for that. They were approached because this pesticide was thought to do a lot of damage to humans and stuff like that. It was known to be dangerous enough that the EPA banned it for sale to homeowners back in 2000. But they thought using it on commercial crops wouldn't be that bad because they're handled differently. Their study started then in 2006, and by 2016, they had gathered enough evidence that showed this chemical was showing up in 14,000 times the amount that was thought to be safe for humans in our produce, in our drinking water, in the ground. They decided that they had to ban it completely. The science was in. This stuff was causing neurological disorders in children, and it was just bad for humans in general. It was due to be banned on the 31st of March, 2017. A funny thing happened, though. On the 29th of March, Pruitt was put in as the head of the EPA. He immediately stepped into the office and shut down with a blanket denial of the problems with this pesticide and said, oh, we're going to take till 2022 to review this science and see if this is or isn't okay. This is something that the EPA was court-ordered to make a ruling on and take action on by the 31st of March. And basically what Pruitt did was ignore the courts even. He just went, no, not going to do it. That brings up the lawsuit. The Natural Resource Defense Council and the Pesticide Action Network of North America have filed a petition that states the EPA dismissal is no response at all, and certainly not what the court ordered the EPA to do by March 31st. They also state that no new evidence has been found to show that this is safe, and by its own findings, the EPA has deemed this a dangerous pesticide. This court is requesting that the EPA is given 30 days to get back on the right track and get this banned. Like one of the scientists involved in this said, the health of our children is more important than a chemical manufacturer's profits. And that's what this comes down to, is too much money being put in these people's pockets by these big corporations. This is a very profitable pesticide. And if you're making a lot of money from something that you could produce rather cheap, you don't want to see that income stream go away. So I guess these guys became politicians not out of concern for our health, but concern for their wallet. Like I said, I've got 2 stories coming up on ancient archaeology, and this stuff is just neat. I'm going to start off in Rome. Rome was thought to be established around the 8th century BC, 800 years before the time of Christ, or the current era, however you want to look at it. So there's a huge amount of history in that area. We all know this. And underground in that area, there's also a gigantic amount of history. So much so that the Sea Line Metro, it's their subway system they've been trying to put in since 2006, I think it was, or 2007. They've only been able to open part of this because of all the holdups they've had hitting these archaeological finds. Like, for example, they hit a mass grave and a barracks for Praetorian soldiers. They also uncovered a big part of an ancient Roman forum. One of their more recent discoveries was a full farm, buried 60 feet below the earth. I mean, that's amazing to think. That farm was there so long ago that 60 feet worth of dirt built up on top of what used to be on the surface of the earth. That's just mind-boggling, isn't it? That farm was a pretty cool find. They found plates and pottery and vases, and they found coins and peach pits and all sorts of other stuff that just tells them, hey, this was a gigantic farm. They've also just recently, their most recent discovery here is a chunk of aqueduct buried down again about 60 feet deep. They believe this is part of the Aqua Appia, and it's the oldest aqueduct known to Rome. It dates back about 312 BC. And because of all the soil and stuff packed on top of it, they were able to find that when this went out of style as a aqueduct, it was eventually used for waste removal as well in the city. Well, that find they have disassembled and got it out of the way. The same with all the rest of this stuff. They have to move it. Construction has to continue. They do lose a lot of finds, a lot of neat archaeology, but they try to save as much as they can to be reassembled at a later date. That's where the coolest part of the story comes on. They are going to open a permanent installation to show off all these relics in the San Giovanni subway station when they open this new Sea Line. They planned for about 2018. They're calling it a Metro Museum. Kind of cool. It's going to be 3 stories underground. So when you're going to get on this train, when you're down there on the platform, you could be walking around and looking at all these ancient artifacts that they pulled out of the ground as they're digging these tunnels for the subway system. I've been saying for years, I need to get to Rome, and here's just another reason I need to go see Rome. The next story I'm going to cover is a little closer to home. It's over here in North America, and it is something that is going to challenge the entire way we believe North America is populated. The current consensus is that humans crossed a land bridge between Russia and Alaska to get here about 13,000 years ago. Well, recently in Canada, on Tikit Island, researchers from the University of Victoria, led by Alicia Gavreau, uncovered a 14,000-year-old campsite. As they were digging around on this island, they found an extremely old hearth, about 10 feet down, covered in peat and pine needles and stuff. They found charcoal in this hearth from a previous fire and had it carbon dated. It dates back 14,000 years. This is 1,000 years further back than when scientists believed we crossed that land bridge. They also found other cool stuff like fishing hooks and spearheads, stone tools. They even found wooden instruments. Because they were buried in peat, they were preserved pretty well. They found like an old string bow to start fires, and they found a device to sling spears better. Some pretty neat stuff here. And the way this campsite was laid out, you could just see how people would set up around it and make their tools in this area and cook in this area and everything like that. How neat is that, huh? But a bigger, more important part of this is it was out on an island, which shows they had boats. And that changes the whole idea of coming over the Bering Strait. A lot of scientists argue that the Bering Strait would have been covered in ice and there would not have been enough food there to sustain a population. So now the thought might be, well, if they came over in boat, they could have fished as they followed the coastline and ended up over here. As Alicia said in her speech to the Society for American Archaeology, this is changing our idea of the way North America was populated. That sums the whole thing up. As with anything scientific, though, there needs to be more study and more information will be gleaned from this. I'm just excited to see what they think of next. For my last story, I want to show you this video. This is a woman over in England who was just too damn drunk and decided she was going to drive. Unfortunately, there is a toddler in this car. I can't believe she got behind the wheel that drunk and was in that much of a rush. From what I understand, the mother and the child are both okay, but when she hits that traffic circle, she flies. This is a perfect example of why you do not drink and drive. And if for some reason you just have to, leave the kid at home. I know that's not how I usually like to end my segments, but I wanted to put this out there. It's something I think everybody should see. This is just an amazing accident. If you take the kid and the mom out of it, it was pretty neat to see. But with that, I'm going to wrap up my show for the day. Remember, if you like what I do, your friends might too, so go ahead and share me on Facebook or Twitter. Every little bit of exposure helps. Keep in mind, I'm here Monday through Friday. That's 5 days a week. Today's Tuesday. I'll be back tomorrow. So I'll see you guys then. Be safe.